Hey guys, and welcome back to Betwixt the Books. We're here with another reading roundtable. This time we have a prompt. Our prompt was a mostly open-ended one this time. We asked everybody to bring a book that reminded them of their childhood. This could have been a reread, it could have been something set when you were a kid, it could have been something that reminds you of the books that you read as a kid, but maybe you wanted to read something newer. So we don't really know what's going to happen here. We are still going to go around and tell you a little bit about who we are as readers, but perhaps more so who we were as readers as a child. And then we'll go around one more time to talk about the books that we brought and what we thought of them. Yes, that's what this is for. We bring on our lovely friends to talk about the things that they're reading. It usually means that somebody gets to hear about a fun new book that they hadn't heard of before, and maybe also steer them away from something that they might have been interested in, because it's not always positive. But that's what we're here for. We're just talking the things we're reading. So, as always, we're gonna go start with Gretchen and go around, and then we'll do it.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Gretchen. I, as a kid reader, I was one of those kids who was like, in the advanced reader class or whatever that shenanigans title was. And I, I like don't remember reading small books, if that makes sense. Like I really love to read. So I just like jumped in. I was like reading really, really big books. Um, so I like ran through my library's like children's section, particularly fantasy. I was such a big fantasy reader as a kid. Very traditional, like knights and dragons and magic and all that type of stuff. Which is why I transitioned really well into like teen fantasy, and now I'm over here reading romance because things make sense. So I really enjoyed this prompt because I won't spoil what I brought. I'm really excited to tell you this whole story that I have with this author of the book that I brought. But one of the goals that I set for myself this year was to read more fantasy, and so this was so nice to get back to a familiar yet different story that I'm going to tell you about. And so we will let our panelists introduce themselves in the order of which we will also be going back around. So Anne, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah. And I think I went through phases. I read entirely one thing at a particular time. And I sort of, stereotypically read what YA didn't exist in the dark ages when I was a kid. But they say that the YA of my era was horse books. So that's the section of reading that I brought to you guys today. I saw an image of a cover of a book that I read, and I'm like, oh my God. And I'll fill you in on more of that. And I think I also read nonfiction, because if you're reading basically fantasy about owning horses as, a early teen kid, at least I was delving, okay, how do I build a barn? Okay, how do I get a horse? How much does it cost? Who is going to pay for this? So all of that. And I still do that. I sort of like Gretchen have transitioned now to sort of romance as the fantasy part, but you just sort of bring in nonfiction books to sort of supplement whatever your current focus is. So that's me, and that's what I'm going to do.
Hello, my name is Josh. I am the producer and head panelist of the BookTube channel Literary Gladiators. And back in season 2, we actually went over a works from our childhood discussion. So it kind of reminds me of the kinds of things that I will be bringing up today. And I'll give you a hint that I actually confirmed my book at the very last minute. I had something in mind, but went ahead with something completely new. But I think it's more reflective of the kind of reader I was. When I was younger, I read a lot of nonfiction, and it was in areas that I was interested in. The presidents was a huge thing, but I also liked the I was into the U.S. states. I was into other famous people, especially if you can connect them with the presidents. I had books about dogs. Just I mean, when I was really young, it was just picture books of actual pictures of all different kinds of things, and it would help you learn how to read and also learn how to associate different kinds of things like animals and food and appliances and vehicles with images.
Hi, I'm Michaela. I'm the other half of this lovely YouTube channel here. I feel like Gretchen and I last year did a video where we did like 30 books from 30 years where we talked about our childhoods. And I, as a reader, I think my reading taste developed naturally in that I was reading horror books as a kid. I was reading sci-fi books as a kid. I was a speculative fiction kid. I also was in what my school called accelerated reading, where I was reading like classics and like the award-winning books, like all of those like really big young reader books. And then I kind of skipped over YA and went straight to adult stuff after that point. And then went back to YA a bit in college because I became friends with Gretchen, and she was like, "What do you mean you haven't read these things?" So there was a handful. Yeah, I know. There was a handful of like maybe the really big popular ones that I definitely read in high school, but I also missed a bunch. Like I remember like Divergent, for instance, I hadn't read any of, and Gretchen was like, excuse me?" So then I just read that whole trilogy in like one weekend. Like that was me as a person in college trying to catch up with other folks. So I am bringing a book that I'm rereading. So I did read as a kid, but it's been so long because I'm not a big rereader. I don't often reread books. It was basically new to me at the same time. Like I know I read it, but I don't remember any of it. So it was a fun time for me to get to basically try something new for the second time. I don't know. So it'll be fun. I can talk a bit about that.
I think there's so much because like there's so much we've already talked about that I'm just like I think it's so interesting. For example, that like Anne and Josh were already nonfiction readers. I came to this very late, right? This is a new thing for me, like in the last like not even 10 years. And I just like went hard into it. But like as a kid, if you had been like read a nonfiction book, I would have been so sad. The closest I think I probably got was like the Clive Cussler books. And if anyone is familiar with those, it's about like underwater excavation and archaeology and stuff like that. And those were very science heavy. But even then I was like skipping like the big historical sciencey bits. And I was like, just go on the adventure. But I did read those with my dad. And then, yeah, we can try to link Josh's video from season 2 as well as our 30 for 30. I feel like we did that video. First of all, we were in the same room, which is wild. That rarely happens. And second of all, I think like we both like we got real deep on some of them. Like we had some like foundational memories kind of come up as we were doing that conversation. So it's a really good one as well as if you're interested in this topic. So in order not to just like blah, 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 I'm going to get on with it. So as I mentioned, as a kid, I was a really, really big fantasy reader, and I always gravitated towards series because I read very fast and I read a lot. And so even at the time when I was a kid, I was looking at the library shelves and there was like 12 books in a connected series. So there's like a bunch of quartets basically in this connected series by an author whose name is Tamora Pierce. Tamora Pierce originally published her first book, the Song of the Lioness Quartet, back in like the 1980s. So they were a little bit, I want to say like, because I'm like older than I was at the time. But she has now published over 30 books, all fantasy, all incredible. I went to a writing workshop 2 summers in a row as a high schooler to learn from her. Because I love her so much. And I am very happy to report that she is as cool in person as she is in her writing. And yeah, I love her a lot. And I am so glad to see that this property that, like I said, was originally published in 1980, came out this year as a graphic novel. This came out a couple of months ago, and this is a graphic novel adaptation of the first book in the Song of the Lioness Quartet. This is called Alana, the First Adventure in the novel. So Alana, the First Adventure, and the Song of the Lioness Quartet is a story about Alana, who has a twin brother named Tom. They live in, I don't want to say like a very traditional fantasy world, but you know, there are magical creatures that are kind of mythical. They're not very common. There's kings and queens, there's magic, that type of a thing. And Tom, they're both Tom and Alana have magical powers, but they are also the only children of a member of the aristocracy. I can't remember if he's a duke or an earl or whatever. Not really that important. And so it's Tom's job as the oldest and only dude to go off and become a knight, and it's Alana's job as a woman to go off to the convent and like learn how to be a lady. And Tom is like, no, I want to be a sorcerer, and I do not want to have anything to do with being a knight. And Alana goes, no, I do not want to be a lady. I want to be a knight. And so basically they decide to swap places, and pretend that instead of twin boys and girl, they're two twin boys. And so Tom goes to the Sorcerer Academy, and Alana disguises herself as a boy and goes off to become a knight. The first book in this series takes you up to when she becomes a squire. The second book takes you from squire to knight, when at the end of that one, it is revealed that she is a woman. And then the next two books are kind of the adventures that happen after that. However, I love this series a lot, but I think one of the things about this series is that it's her first one. And I think all of us can relate to a book, like the first maybe book or so from an author that comes out and has like some pacing problems, and maybe like, you know, they're kind of figuring out how to do it, right? And also Alana was originally written as one giant book. It was supposed to be like one of those giant fantasy tomes, but her publisher told her, and again, this because this is pre-Harry Potter, that kids didn't read big books. And so she had to chop it up into 4 pieces because originally it wasn't meant to be that way. This in novel form is too much plot. Like I said, it starts with she comes in to be a page, and it covers years of her learning how to fight, learning how to be a sorcerer, learning all the history, introducing you to all these characters. Alana makes friends with the Crown Prince and all of his friends. So essentially, there is a huge cast of small white boys who run around in a page outfit. So they all look the same and wear the same outfit. And when translating that to a graphic novel with a same illustrator, it's also very difficult in this book to remember who was who outside of Alana, because Alana is always the shortest out of all of them. And the only one with red hair. And so, yeah, it's a lot to cover even when you can get more of the narrative, right? And the narrative can go into a little bit more detail and into a little bit more history. There's a whole back end, like I think it's only, if I can even show you. Yeah, like this much of the book takes place in an entirely separate country that actually has an incredible backstory and a history that you just do not get, and therefore makes the final fight kind of like what is happening here. Because one of the things that I've always really appreciated about her books, even from this first one, is that she has like a really global view of her world. And so even though this book for the most part takes place in one country, Tort Hall, like she hasn't just thought about this country, she's thought about the world and the different people in it and the different cultures. And that was my first introduction, I think, at least in a kid's book, to a fantasy that really, really thought deeply about more than just like the one kingdom it was set in. And because again, there's like this assumption at the time that kids can't handle that amount of world building, which is why a lot of people, like Michaela said, just skip to like adult books when they're ready, because you can find some, some of those books kind of childish in that way. So yeah, I love these books. I love them so much, and I think that everyone should read them. And I will buy all 4 books, because this does say they're going to do all 4 books in graphic novel form, and I will buy them to support them. And maybe other books will execute it a little bit better. But this is a very big and confusing story to put into a small graphic novel. And I just don't think that it does the full weight of the plot justice. And I will say, if you're like, oh, I think I've read this story a whole bunch of times and you want to read something different, my favorite series of hers is actually a quartet that comes after this. And it's called The Protector of the Small. And it follows the story of Kelladry. And Kel, should we call her Kel throughout the whole book. Kel is the first woman to go for her knighthood as a woman. So after Alana is like revealed as a knight and she becomes this great hero, they allow women to go try to become knights. And Kel is the first person to do that, like as a woman. And I think that plot is far more interesting because you see the different ways that people and like different generations and stuff like that, and the different hoops that she has to jump through in a society like adjusting to these new like gender ideas. She also doesn't have any magical powers, so she has to get everything that she gets through like true grit and grind. So yeah, that one's like, I think even better than this one, if anyone is interested. But you can't go wrong. I love all her books. But that is what I have brought today.
How did you approach this when you were younger? Because you had said that looking back, it was very plot heavy, and you also said that it would be complicated for younger readers unless it's complete in this fashion.
As a kid, I really felt like, because I was someone who felt like a lot of kids' books were really childish, but I also didn't want to read like Lord of the Rings, right? Like that just wasn't where I was. I didn't really feel like, because again, I mean, this is still even really pre-YA, right? That there wasn't really too many of those bridge books that helped like grow me as a reader, but weren't like really far out of my way. So I really loved these books as a kid because it felt really thoughtful and intelligent, but didn't feel like as overwhelming as like Lord of the Rings did to me at that age. So I think I found them at exactly the right time in my reading. I haven't reread this series in a while. I go back and reread the Kel series quite a bit. So I don't necessarily know how the books would stand up to me now, but I remember as a kid being like, finally, like this is a really, really good fantasy book that isn't like talking down to me because I'm a kid, like I'm capable of understanding some higher level thinking here. So yeah, I really loved them. I do wonder now if like this is a series that I don't think, even though Alana is younger in this one, I don't think we would shelve it in children's now. I think we would shelve it in YA. And I think it is shelved in YA now, if there are shelves where it is still on. But yeah, I was like, oh, thank God.
I was watching some video where someone was reading the graphic novel that just came out for the Raven Boys, and she was talking about how it made more sense as like a companion for people who already read the books and loved them, as like another thing that you could have from the same world and like just enjoy. Do you feel like it makes more sense as like you, a person who's read them and loved them, and reading the graphic novel, or do you think that, I know you said that it's stuff is lost, but do you think it would be a good introduction for kids? Like, do you think it would be good for them to read this and then maybe they'd want to go and pick up the novels afterwards?
Yeah, I think that the people who did this, by the way, are Vida Ayala, who is a trans non-binary Afro-Puerto Rican writer. And so she did the adaptation of the writing, or they did, sorry. And Sam Beck is an artist living in Toronto and the author of a fantasy trilogy, Verse. So there is also, if you like the art, there is more art from Sam. So to give particularly Vita, credit. They did a really, really good job putting as much in here as they could, I think. Because they do, I mean, I know I made a comment about like when they're in the Brazier Desert at the end, like there's not a lot, but they do really try to include a lot of that history. But the thing about this is that like the magic system's really complicated, right? The I think this is a good primer, but you would need to go to the book to get the full context. And again, I do feel like doing something like there's like one where she's learning how to fight. And like, what is this? She gets beat up. And then 1, 2, 3, 4 spreads later, they've like done her entire training montage and then she beats up the bully.
Mm.
And I'm just like, in the book, it's clearer how much work she has to do because she is physically smaller and weaker. You know, Kel is like 6 feet and she towers over a lot of the guys. So she's like really good at being strong. But Alana, I don't think she ever gets higher than like 5.5 feet tall. She's like she's a lot shorter and she's very small. And so the book is more like how much like, and she's not a natural swordsman, which I think is one thing that's like really made a point of in the book of how much harder and longer she has to work than all of the boys that she's training with to do that. And I think like, so that's just like an example of something here that I think is shortchanged.
Right.
Because like I said, there's like 1 page of training montage, you know, and then it's just like, she swords now.
Yeah.
It doesn't get any at all into her training with her powers, which is a whole thing. And then the entire final fight is her like using her powers. And I'm like, when did she learn this? I mean, I know, but like, come on now.
Yeah.
So with that said, I do really like the art. You know, I don't want anyone to, it is a very beautiful book. But yeah, there was just, I think as someone who really, really loves the book and is not a natural graphic novel reader, which I think is very important. I don't naturally reach for these. I just felt like a lot was lost. All right, Anne, you have, I technically also brought a horse. This is Moonlight.
Oh, a really good horse.
So now you can take it away with more horse.
You can with my horse. Like I said in the intro, I did apparently the YA books that YA kids were supposed to read in the 19 whenever the heck it was. But again, YA wasn't a category, and it sounds like it wasn't a category, you know, for quite a while.
The first YA was put in the first YA category in a bookstore like section was put in the early 2000s. Okay. Because I did a research project on this, so that's.
So we are probably the last generation that really dealt with that not being a thing. It started being a thing when we hit high school, probably.
Well, anyway, so the horse thing, the YA books didn't exist apparently, and you know, I, like a lot of particularly girls, got into horses somewhere along the way, and you know, older elementary school, middle school. And I literally plowed through every horse book in the library. My 4th grade teacher said, you have to start reading books other than horse books. And he recommended a book, which is actually a delightful book, but at the time it just freaked me out so much that I went back to reading horse books. So, but you know, as someone who loved horses, I really did. I could draw them, I could make them in clay, I could make bread loaves out of, you know, I could turn anything into a horse. But the
Did you
book
like to
that I
ride them?
brought today, yep, I rode them as well. I think my first lessons were at a barn in the middle of our town, and I would walk there and then walk back, you know, the mile and a half home. The next barn that I was at was about 5 miles away. I remember my dad driving me in the car and going like, this is where you go. And this is, you know, and they just sent me off on my bicycle. I had to be what, 10 or 11 years old and, you know, have a good time, man. So the world was a little bit different, but horses were a big thing, and a lot of people had them. You know, people built little barns in their backyards and whatnot, and you know, bought their kids horses. Um, but the book that I brought is called The Summer Pony by an author called Jean Slaughter Doty. I believe it's Doty. It could be Dottie, but that would require two T's, I think. Um, and the book that I had, this is the this is what the image looks like on the cover. Um, it's illustrated by Sam Savitt. Jean Doty is she was in the 1950s. She wrote a children's TV series, I believe, or you know, worked on a TV series, but she ultimately was an animal lover and you know ended up having horses of her own, and so in the 1970s you know started writing these books. This book came out in 1973, but I couldn't find my copy of the book, so went to the library, and just let me show you what happened from point one to point B. You have got, this is the book that I grew up reading as a, you know, heading into middle school kid. And this is what they've done. She's suddenly become much younger, and it's also become an early reader chapter book, which wasn't what I thought I was doing. I thought I was really sophisticated with my horse knowledge and my horse images and whatnot. But
One on
we
the
can
left
talk
looks far
about,
more attractive.
it was just a fascinating. I'm like, no, that's wrong. That's not what she's supposed to look like. I remember the pictures from this book. I could draw the pictures from this book still for you. But the book anyway is, again, sort of rereading it, the sense of nostalgia, you know, reading about the barn, the smells of the barn, the petting the horse, the, you know, jumping on a horse and taking off down the fields. God, I was in, you know, seventh heaven reading it again. I just like, I so remembered what it was like. And I really did. This girl doesn't, but I literally had architecture books out about what would I need to do and where could I put it in the yard and how can I convince my parents that we can afford a horse. But anyway, this was how I spent a lot of my time. But the book is basically, I think she's 11 or 12 years old, and the girl's parents agree. She's had a couple of summers of horseback riding at camp, and her parents say that, well, let's just go rent a horse. And of course, in her mind, she's imagining, you know, that she's going to have some sort of incredible thoroughbred, you know, gorgeous animal and whatnot. And of course, the place they go to in the middle of March is, oh, it's awful. The guy is just a lunatic. He has, you know, more ponies than anybody should have. They're all scraggly, but, you know, he has one that sort of fits her. His are all different sizes and it's not going to work out. But one eventually, she and her mom, you know, say this one will be fine, and she's trying to hide her disappointment and whatnot. And apparently I thought this was normal behavior when I was a kid. I thought, well, of course you'd be disappointed that you can't have secretariat as opposed to this scraggly pony thing. But anyway, again, in like a fantasy world, the parents move the car out of the garage and they build a sort of a place where the horse can stay. I mean, I'm like, wow, this is a great world to live in. And then it sort of ends out their adventures with the horse, and you know, there's of course a little bit of drama at the end when she thinks the guy is coming back to take her little horse away, but of course her parents have decided that no, they're going to build a barn out in the yard, and she'll get to keep the horse for as long as she wants. Truly a horse child's dream. If this could have been my life, I would have been really happy. But I thought it was true. Why couldn't it happen? It happened in a book. Why couldn't it happen to me? So it's not a complex book. It's not there, you can the plot is not anything. It doesn't give you really anything new. It's just a way. It's like a fantasy for someone who happens to like that particular type of book. I found the sort of switch to a younger image on the cover really surprising. I found as I was reading it, I'm going like, this is just wrong. That's not the age that she was. This was much more appealing to me as a 11, 12, 13-year-old than this little 6-year-old is what it looks like to me. And I just find it, we've talked about book covers more so than book illustrations, but how it changes. I know Gretchen and Michaela sort of evaluated a book of theirs that they had, enjoyed, and the covers had changed completely. Gretchen and I have talked about, romance novels going from the bodice stripper images or get a shirt on dude images to, more color, they're sort of a solid color. They're more graphic, not realistic. I just thought this was interesting. And I can see in terms of the complexity of the writing, I can see that it might be better as a chapter book, but that's just not where it sat in my head. The book has enough, again, I have no idea when kids actually start falling in love with horses these days. If they really are when they're, early chapter book readers, then it probably makes more sense. You probably do know all the things, but the details that are in the book, even though they're 1970s information and we probably know more about horse care, it's still pretty specific and pretty, the information is there. As someone who knew horses and loved them, I found this book really satisfying. I find the whole image change really fascinating. And I thought you guys might.
Was the internal text the same? Like the text inside both of them are more or less the same?
The inside book is exactly the same, just all of the images. The first one is illustrated by Sam Savitt, and the second one is illustrated by Ruth Sanderson. And this is 1973, and this one is 2008.
How thick is that book, the 2008 one? Can you?
It's a little bit thicker, but not immensely. Right. It's pretty much the same. It just has a few more, it has more illustrations in it, but not, not hugely so.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's really funny is again, the same thing with a series that has been repubed as many times as this one has. This is not a good representation because that's the art of the graphic novel person, but when you look at the covers of this, you can literally see all of the different fads that we were going through during the time, because the first one is very illustrative. It's very gorgeous. There's one where it's just Moonlight's face for some reason. Moonlight only shows up halfway through the book. Unclear why it says Alana, the first adventure, and then there's a picture of a horse, and I'm like, it's not a horse book, y'all. And then there is one where it's her, and it's basically set up to look like a Twilight love triangle with her in the front and then the prince and this thief that she meets who are behind her, and they're all also wearing clothes that look like they came from the Gap. That was the one that had just come out when I saw her the first time in for the high school writing retreat, and she's like, yeah, these are terrible and I hate them. Because obviously they have no say. And she was like, why are they wearing clothes from the Gap? This is a medieval fantasy novel. And also it's not
school special fantasy.
Yeah, she's 12 to 14 for most of this book. Why are you setting it up to look like Twilight? Is confused. But anyway, how did you find out, was this the book that you went looking for specifically for this, and you just found out that it had been republished, or how did you find the newer
No,
version?
I was looking for my book, but then I saw that it existed on Amazon. I saw that it existed in stores, and then I went to the library, grabbed it, and it didn't feel the same because the illustrations they're so different, even though it's exactly the same text. I can promise you it's exactly the same. And again, so many questions that I don't know the answer to. Why in 2008? This book was written, published in 73. It came out when I was, 11 or 12. What made them republish it now? Because there are no, unlike your book, Gretchen, this doesn't have a whole bunch of other copies. There's only, 73 and 2008, as far as I know. I just noticed that it was different. I'm thinking, is that the same book? And the author's the same, but the illustrator's different. So it was just by chance, and the fact that I couldn't find Mark, that I went to the library and grabbed this one. And yes, indeed, it reads just the same. But I don't, again, have we changed that much as readers? Again, it's just one of those questions as to why.
It
I
may
think
be
I think that you could argue that.
it may also be the size of it, because like we were saying, or like Gretchen was saying, how middle grade books have been allowed to be thicker and are now
Bigger.
very regularly much thicker. So because it was only, I'm sure it's under 200 pages, they were like, oh, this must be a chapter book, so we'll age it down to the age that's reading chapter books.
Yeah. No, the original is like 121, and the other one, with all the illustrations, it's gotten up to 135. People,
Whoa.
come on.
Pushing
You
the
can
limits.
read it from your kitchen to your car as you're going out. Yeah, it's just interesting. It was just kind of a fun thing to think about, like, have interests of kids and people and ages changed enough that it really is, the subject matter is just more appropriate to a younger age. But anyway, it was fun. I really did. I'm like, hey, we've got half an acre of land. Can't we get a horse?
Depends on the laws of your area.
We actually can't. I can get 3 toy goats in Northampton, but I cannot put a horse on, within the limits of where we are.
It's usually so many per acre, if I'm not mistaken.
And yeah, however it gets split, Josh, I don't think my desire to get a horse is going to happen. And I think Jerome would kill me if I really brought one out.
There's a lot more to taking care of a horse than getting on it and riding it.
That's the strain of my childhood. There's a lot more than just buying the horse and building the barn, and
They spew out excrement without even thinking about it.
that's right.
They have great fertilizer.
That is true. That was my mother's only thought about a horse. Well, we would have fertilizer. But anyway, it was really fun to go back and sort of visit the book again. It was stunning how fast those memories come back when you read something that you read sort of consistently and probably often. I really did. The librarians were like, no new horse books this month, Anne. So that's my story. And yeah, it was fun. I don't think I would recommend it per se. She wrote, I think there's another companion, of course, with Summer Pony, you'd have to have a winter pony, right? And I think she goes on more adventures. I didn't read it at the time. If I knew it existed, or if it had existed, I probably would have. But these are the days when librarians didn't buy specifically for specific people. i.e. me.
How dare they?
How
Depriving
dare they
you.
not get me some more horse books? What is wrong with them? Yeah, that's all I got, guys. But fun to think about anyway. Your cat is beautiful, Josh.
Oh, thank you. His name is Tito.
Hey, Tito.
Tina says, "Oh no, you've noticed me. Never mind."
Who called my name?
Right, Josh, what did you bring for us?
Okay. As a I would when I was younger, I was like probably many of you read to as a kid, a very young kid. Some of the books that I enjoyed were Little Critter, Thomas the Tank Engine. I also in school was read some memorable things like The Ghost's Dinner by Jacques de Quinoy. It's part of a series that includes The Ghosts Go to Loch Ness and The Ghosts in the Cellar. And The Very Hungry Caterpillar was another favorite of mine. But they didn't necessarily define the kind of books that I read or collected. I was more into uh, nonfiction in areas of interest. And when I was in first grade, when I was 7, I started getting into the American presidents. My mother ended up getting the same poster of uh, all of the presidents that we had in our first grade class. And uh, the book that I selected for today is the complete version of what my grandmother put together for me to get into the American presidents, and that is the Scholastic Encyclopedia of the Presidents and Their Times by David Rubel. And this, the part that my grandmother put into a bind-up, she copied this section here. This section here on the top. It has the name of the president, the what order they were in when they served, and then just general information that I studied and have since remembered more or less so, such as when they were born, when they died, their political party, their vice president, the first lady, the stepchildren, or the children. I'm just reading it off of here because George Washington had 2 stepchildren. He never had children of his own. And the nickname, and then a fact about them. Like, for instance, George Washington's is that he was the first president to appear on a postage stamp. But when I bought this book, or when I got this book, I found that it was the same information, and then there was even more information. This book in particular concentrates on their presidency, what they did during their presidency, and the things that were taking place within their presidency, like particular figures, particular events. Uh, this is one of many books that I had. I probably could have brought many more, but I think that this really defines where my reading, especially for the American presidents, began. And I remember going to the library. I would get individual biographies from a particular series. I was 2 years ago, I was looking for that particular series, but it doesn't seem like they carry it anymore. And I've noticed that a lot of the books in general are, I think they're of a different quality, because I think that it feels like they saw the younger readers back then in a bit more of an advanced light. Then now it seems like who is so-and-so, that series. It doesn't necessarily pertain to all of the American presidents, but it pertains to famous figures. I think I have seen though like one about Abraham Lincoln and Barack Obama. But this book here goes up to Bill Clinton because it was first released in '94. This is an updated version from 1997. I got into U.S. presidential history in 1999, which that was Bill Clinton was still the president at the time, and some of the other books that stuck out were Lives of the Presidents, and there was it was more of a fun-filled picture book, and there was something that was part of a series that included other things, like there was a separate book about states that I got into to learn more about the states. But I do want to revisit this and read it throughout because I think that it gives it's a good entryway into learning about each administration. But I very much recognize and remember the factual information on the top, and it was interesting to refresh myself because there were things that really stuck out that may have snuck out of my mind some.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see as someone who's done a lot of like comparative nonfiction work too. So, because a lot of it changes, like Common Core comes into existence, and all of a sudden there's like this massive emphasis on informational text, but informational text that includes a high number of graphical things. So, I feel like a lot of the nonfiction that we had when we were younger was like very text heavy. And now they're like, why have text when you could also have a timeline and a box and a photo and a this and a that? And actually what we found out is that kids have a lot of a really hard time reading that as opposed to just text, because we very rarely teach children, specifically young children, how to read a informational text page that has like 5 different things happening on, because they're just like, they're overwhelmed. So I do think that that's like really interesting, because I know when I was younger, I was turned off by a lot of nonfiction because it was so text heavy. And I was like, this seems boring. Which is crazy now considering what I do for hopefully a living someday.
This book does have a timeline and plenty of visuals as well. I think that for younger readers, I think that even though there is quite enough text, the books that I would get at the library were very text arranged, but there was also a lot of visuals to grasp on, like photos and pictures.
Yeah, this is reminding me of one little kid we had at the library, and she was like this tall and just like, you know, a blonde, like pixie cut. And she would always come in wearing like her cat ears and like a pink shirt. And she would just come up to the desk and she would go, "Excuse me, I need books on human anatomy." I was like, "Pardon?"
That was me as a kid. Yeah.
Yeah, because and it was so adorable. And so like you get out of her like later on that, like, you know, she wants to be a veterinarian, but we didn't have a lot of books on cat anatomy. So she was like, I want the human anatomy books. And so you like give this whole, like, I think at one point we had a book that was titled like The Book of Blood. And there's just this like 2 foot tall child in like cat ears carrying out the Book of Blood. He was like, I love being a librarian, man. Because little kids would go ahead. Sorry, Josh, go ahead.
How old was this child?
6 to 8. Very young.
I got in trouble in 2nd grade for bringing in a book that showed the anatomical gestation of a fetus because my mom was pregnant and I needed to know like exactly what was happening, and apparently that was inappropriate for 2nd graders to have access to. Which, ew, gross. That's just human biology. Get out of here. You should let kids know if they're curious. But yeah, that was me as a kid. I was like, I must see the entire musculoskeletal system and know how it works. My mom was like, why are you cleaning off a dead animal skull with your toothbrush in the backyard? And I was like, don't worry about it. I must know. me at 6 years old.
I just like, I so wish that I had started when you started, Josh, because sometimes I'm just like, who was that president again? Man, if I had cared about this earlier.
Now, do you have this book that Josh is sharing, Gretchen? We need to
I
get it for
don't,
you. I think perhaps you need to have it in your collection.
I have at one point seen the updated, because Scholastic still puts out encyclopedias of the presidents every single president, right? They update it for the next one.
Right.
So Scholastic still has that book in circulation, just it looks different.
And they might do it every 4 years too, because of the updated election, but it all depends.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we do like, as someone who used to buy nonfiction books for the children's department, you would do the same thing, like to update your presidential biographies as well. Cause because when you buy them in sets, right? You don't just buy like those biography sets like one at a time. When you're buying a presidential biography set, it's like you buy Washington to whoever
Right.
is the new one, right? And we would have those. Now, did the you know Buchanan book circulate like the Washington book did? No, but you just bought them in a set. So that would be fun. Get my whole new set of like 40 some odd books, presidential biographies.
I would be all over it.
So good. I'm right there with you, Josh. I feel you.
I got my first complete book of U.S. presidents by William A. D. Gregorio, which I feel is the quintessential for general readers when I was 10, because that seemed to have everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it does. It has just about everything you want to know.
My turn,
Take
I'll
it away.
go. Okay. I, like I said, was mostly a sci-fi kid when I was reading contemporary fiction. I was reading a lot of classics in middle school for the most part. But I also was a science nerd. So while Josh was doing history, I was doing a lot of science nonfiction because I also wanted to be a veterinarian. So I got a lot of things that had to do with animals and anatomy and things like that. I was gifted Redwall by, I learned that it's Brian Jakes, but I always pronounced it Brian Jacques, and that might have been just because my family is French Canadian and this is spelled very French, but he's actually a British author. Because the protagonists are animals, so it was gifted to me by my mom's husband's mother, so my step grandma, my grandma Sue. She gifted it to me for my birthday, I believe, and it was like a huge series, and they knew I was a reader, so it was like definitely something important to me. This one, funnily enough, was also published in the 80s, so it's a slightly older title. It's actually like over 300 pages, which I feel is like very long for that time period to get published. But I think fantasy usually gets a little bit more of a pass when it comes to page length than like some other fiction does. I listened to the audiobook of this one, which is actually a full cast audio, which I think is great. If you have a road trip with some middle grade aged kids, this would be a great one to listen to. It was like fully acted. It was great, and the author actually reads the narration bits, and he's great at that. Like I was so surprised, and I actually went and looked it up, and apparently he wrote this one when he was working as like a milkman delivering milk to a school for children of the blind. So he was reading this story aloud to the kids at the school every time he came to do a delivery, which is such an interesting story and like way of writing this. So yeah, like he's a great storyteller. It was such a good time. I highly recommend the audiobook. If you haven't heard of it, Redwall is each of the books has to do with different characters in different series, but this was the opening, but it all centers around this place called Redwall Abbey, which is a place where a bunch of mice basically are like clergymen who live in a like idealistic, cute little fantasy world, like country town. The first book follows Matthias, who is a young mouse who's growing up in the clergy, and the Redwall Abbey is being attacked by a group of rats led by Clooney the Scourge, who is like this pirate rat who is coming to attack and try and get all of the resources that the Abbey has. And Matthias goes on a bunch of adventures in order to take up the mantle of hero. He tries to find the great lost sword that they used to have from the hero who founded the abbey, and it was stolen at some point by birds, and then from the birds it was stolen by a snake, and he has to go all over the place to get this sword. And you get alternating chapters between him trying to do this adventure and then what's happening at the abbey and what Clooney the Scourge is doing in order to try and attack the abbey. You get from both perspectives. One of the biggest like complaints a lot of people have of this is that it's very repetitive, and I think that comes from this being written serially. Like, it feels like it was written serially. Like, each chapter has a full arc, so you're going through like action climax, action climax, action climax, like every single chapter. And when it's 300 pages of that, it does get a bit repetitive, so that's there. But for a debut book from someone who is not, or at that point was not like a writer, it was just somebody who was trying to entertain a bunch of kids, like, it definitely, it was enthralling. It was a super fun ride, and I understand why there's like 20 books in this series or whatever. Like, he was writing this series all the way up until his death, and I think like 2011, 2012 I think was the last time that one of these came out. But each of the books follows a different character, and like sometimes the characters in one story will show up in another story as like a hero of ages. So they go through all different time periods, and you kind of get to see the way that one book's character actually had like resonance throughout the world for generations. But yeah, I was not normally a fantasy kid. I remember really loving the second book in the series, which is called Mossflower, which is about the town that the Abbey is in, and it's actually a prequel to this one, so you get to see what the town looked like before the Abbey was built. But I'm not a big reader. I hadn't read this since I was a kid, and it was like reading it for the first time all over again, and it was just fun and cute little fantasy action. Like, it was good. It's very British, I will say that. And I don't think I registered that as a kid. Like, some of there's dialects written in here, and I went, oh, that's like Northern English dialect. Like, I can hear it now as an adult and go, oh, I know where that accent is coming from. Which as a kid I didn't maybe pick up on. I was just like, oh, it's like fantasy garbledy language. But when you're listening to it through the audiobook, I was like, oh no, it's very British. It's so British, this book. So it has that little bit there too, but it was super fun and cute.
You know what's really wild?
What?
So the way that this original book got written was when she was she was working at an all-girls boarding school, and she was like one of the chaperone supervisor people, and she would write a new chapter of this and read it to them at night. That's also how this got written.
Yeah.
As well.
Cool. So I guess that's how you got into children's publishing in the 80s. You just had to tell kids stories.
Getting vibes of the Tale of Despero with your book.
Yes. This is the 30th anniversary edition. This was not my original edition of it. It's like a mass market paperback. I had picked it up because I had an idea several years ago to do a discussion talking about rodent protagonists in children's books, because there's Tale of Despero, there's Stuart Little, like there's a bunch of stories that have to do with
the Rats of Nim.
Yes, yeah,
or
there's
the
lots
Mice or whatever.
Yes, yeah, there's lots of kids books that feature rodents as the protagonist. Probably the like kids are small and mice are small type thing.
But I find it interesting that in books like that, they view mice in a more protagonizing way and rats in an antagonizing way. Not to say that mice are antagonizing, but it feels like in reality, rats are probably a better pet to have.
Yeah.
I think that they're much more, that they're much more like you can create a better bond with them than with mice. Mice are entertaining, but they're not like they're not going to be affectionate. You're not really going to be able to train them as well.
And I'm sure we'll get people, arguing with that, oh yes, mice are trainable. I'm like, no, they're not. But I don't really.
It's probably the like cultural perspective, right? Like rats, especially in England, like they're disease carriers and pests, right? So there's a couple of antagonists in here, right? There's the rats are like the main antagonists of the abbey, but there's also the birds which eat mice. There's a cat at one point who says that he's become a pescatarian and he no longer eats small four-legged creatures. So it was like very cute.
Fish are friends.
Yes.
Not
Yeah,
food.
there's a snake. There's also other creatures that are like positive. Like at the abbey there's like a badger, like a female badger who's like the head of the defenses for the abbey, and she's in charge of protecting them. So there are other like type, and there's a bunch of, I think they're moles or voles, that were very silly. They fought with each other all the time. Like they couldn't come to consensus, and they all worked together as a group. So like anytime Matthias was like, "I need to do this," they're like, "Well, we have to vote about it." Like, well, no, we can't just decide to help you. We need to come to consensus about this. And they're arguing with each other the whole time. And Matthias is like, "I'm on a time crunch. I need to go get
that's
this
very
sword."
British. Suggest the monarchy is the way to go. We don't do representative democracy.
It was, and I think the only way that he was able to get them to work was by working, like he had to make a deal with an owl that the owl wouldn't eat them anymore. So like there's a whole lot of like small creature politics going on here. That was very cute. And I do also want to say that there are hero men and women in this series, which I was surprised. I was like fully expecting, because it was from the 80s, to be like very like, and the women stay at home and cook. But no, like there's hero girls and hero boys. There's no like gender issues there or anything that I saw, which was like quite refreshing, especially from something from this time period. I was expecting it, but it wasn't there. So yeah.
80s was a little bit more evolved.
They did get the vote earlier.
That's true.
Could be that.
Did you ever, Michaela, did you ever do the rodent? Because I'm thinking like there are a lot of books that have mice / small rodents as, I'm just thinking about it when you mentioned it. I'm going like, oh my God.
I don't think I ever did the video. I did reread Stuart Little, and I've reread this one now. I know I own a copy of Tale of Despero somewhere behind me. But I don't think I did the video at the time that I was planning to do it. It was around the time that Gretchen and I were living with each other. So it was like a mildly tumultuous time. Like we were moving and doing stuff. So it never actually happened. Right. I might still do it. There's nothing stopping me from doing it now.
No, yeah, I was just thinking of not quite mice, but what were they? The littles?
There's the borrowers.
The borrowers, yep. And there are others slightly more series of mousy type creatures.
Who Moved My Cheese had mice and little people that were the size of mice.
Yeah, that's right.
There's a lot. So yeah, I mean, it might be, I wanted to do it as like is there something that I could tie to like culturally why we do this, why there are so many books that have rodent protagonists? It probably does just come down to children are small and thus will empathize with small creatures. But
Gretchen, if you can't think of anything to do, you can start exploring this topic in your spare time.
In my free time.
Yes, exactly.
This time that I've spent with you, this is my free time for
this is your free time. Yeah, we get that. Thank you.
Highly recommend the audiobook. It was super fun. Recommend. Yeah, I think it stands up. I am surprised that there hasn't been another re-release of this one recently, because it feels like there's a lot of re-releasing of books from our childhood right now. Like, I don't know, they're re-releasing like the Fear Street books and things like that. So things that were popular in the 80s and 90s are kind of getting repackaged, and I'm surprised this one isn't. We'll see. Maybe it will at some point, but hasn't yet.
It's a nostalgia craze right now, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we would once again like to thank Josh and Anne for joining us today. Josh already mentioned it in the open, but we will also add a link in the description to the fantastic Literary Gladiators channel and all the fantastic stuff that they do over there. I was also thinking, as we were talking about this, in terms of do books stand up on a reread for the 10th anniversary special of Betwixt the Books. We also reread the first ever book that we did as a review with Taylor. We brought Taylor back, and it was a whole like OG reunion. And it was really interesting how, you know, the book hasn't changed. We just read the same book again, but how we change as people in those 10 years and what we read for and what we see in things. And that was a really, really interesting discussion that we can also put as a link in case you're interested in doing this yourself. And we highly recommend going back to those books that were foundational, even just to think about them, like Michaela and I did in our 30 books for 30 years video, because like many of us have said today, it brings back these memories. It brings back, like, reminds you of like this other time. And you also just may be curious about what has changed in you since you did that. Sorry, Josh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, on the topic of revisiting works, we spent our entire 17th season revisiting. We revisited 15 works that we discussed on previous seasons. And there was so many different things that we could, it's not just certain people revisiting the works, but giving other people the opportunity to discuss them. And I thought it was a great project, a great idea.
Well, that is so awesome. Thank you for bringing that up. And we'll be sure, like I said, to drop a link in the cards in the description, all that jazzy stuff. I say we will. Michaela will post this. So I'm just basically assigning her tasks.
Thanks.
You're welcome. So this was a fun, more feel-good episode because earlier this month, Michaela and I released a review of a nonfiction book, One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This, which was about the genocide in Gaza and therefore not as feel-good. So we paired these on purpose. We were trying to pair something else for next month, but the library holds have kind of changed our plan. So we were talking about doing our translated book next month, which is Reservoir Bitches by, it just disappeared on my thing, Dalia de la Cerda, thank you. That was going to be our play. The library does not agree that I should get a hold of this book. And so we are going to try to go for our feminist text instead for our joint review next month. Michaela has decided that we should read a feminist horror retelling of Bluebeard called Sour Cherry by Natalia Theodoradou. And I am definitely not pronouncing that last name right. We're gonna see how this goes, because if you know anything about me, you know that I don't like horror. So we're gonna see if I can read it, and then if I do read it, we'll see how much screaming I do in the review. But we invite you back for that. And we do have another themed reading roundtable next month as well, which, spoiler alert, Josh will be back again. And we will be doing banned children's books for Banned Books Month. So we're really excited about that. Like I said, we're trying to pair, I guess, the horror and the still works if I can make it. But you know, Michaela doesn't do this to me often, and I do often drag her down the romance route, so I feel like it's only fair to reciprocate. But I find this more painful.
I'm sorry. I physically can't do romance all the time. I will go insane. It makes me depressed, which seems counterintuitive.
Well, you can just read my history or political science books with me. Didn't you enjoy One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This? Wasn't that a happy time? Anyway, it is, as always, chaos here betwixt the books. We don't know what we're doing. Even when we try to have a plan, plans change. We are dropping an extra video this month that you probably actually have already seen by the time this comes out. So we accidentally, or, you know, special did a video, another video this month. We don't know. It's chaos. But we're so happy that Anne and Josh joined us. And we will see you all for whatever happens next time. Thanks, guys. Bye.